Hi, I'm Zachary Hamby, and I am the author of about 15 books. Most of those books are written for teachers to use in their classrooms, such as the Reaching Olympus series. But some of my books were written for general readership. For example, the Hero's Guidebook, which is written for younger readers, and it teaches them the concept of the hero's journey and how they can spot that concept in their favorite books or movies or video games. Currently, I'm working on a new book that's going to center around mythical creatures. And for this book, there are going to be quite a few original illustrations. Now, I have illustrated my books before. Most of the illustrations that I do for my books are black and white, but this book is going to feature many, probably over 50 color illustrations. So, as I was working on this book, I thought it would be fun to share my process. How do I take line art? How do I add color? How do I add texture in Photoshop to create a final result that will look professional and be eye-catching for the reader? So I should say that I am not a professional artist. I never went to art school. I've never been formally trained on Photoshop, but I'm going to show you some simple tips for how you can take your own line art and turn it into color illustrations.
When I draw, I prefer to use a drawing pad. This is not a super expensive one. This probably costs $7. It's a 6-inch by 8-inch pad. You could definitely use plain old paper. Here's the picture that we're going to be scanning into the computer. And as my drawing tool, I recently discovered Papermate Flare medium pens. And previously I was using expensive art pens that were like about $8 each. Well, you can get a package of these for about the price of one of those old pens, and I believe it actually works better. And something to consider when you're creating your drawing. We have a lot of thick black lines, and we have a minimum of cross-hatching or shading. There is some shading. For example, I've got a few marks there, some here. But what you want to avoid is really heavy shading, lots of crisscrossing lines. I'll show you what I'm talking about with a different drawing that I did. I did a lot of cross-hatching and line shading all throughout this picture because it's intended to be black and white. But this picture I know I'm going to scan in, and I want there to be as many open white spaces as possible because that's going to make coloring it on the computer that much easier. As I mentioned before with my previous books, I've done black and white illustrations for the interior and full color covers. But for this book, the illustrations inside are going to be full color, similar to what you see here.
So this is what it looks like once you have your picture scanned into Photoshop. Just so you know, I'm using Adobe Photoshop CS6. And the first thing you'll want to do is, as you can see, I've got the whole pad scanned in here. So what I want to do is I want to select the actual picture. I want to go over here and set my background color to white. And then I want to right click and choose select inverse because I'm going to delete all of the rest of that picture, the pad. And it's going to ask me if I want to use white, and I do. And then I'm going to deselect that. So I have my picture here. This is kind of a funny looking guy, a troll. And you can see the lines are kind of gray. So what I want to do is I want to go over here and I want to create a levels filter. And I want to make that black really dark. And then I want to take my white, and this is going to lighten the white parts. So you can see now that my white is very white and my black is very dark. Then after I've done that, I created a level, so I want to make sure that that stays permanent. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose merge down, and that will merge that down to the background level. Just a really fast thing that I like to do. I'm going to crop the picture so that my canvas size is not huge. I just want to use the space that's directly around the troll. So I'm going to crop to make that a bit smaller. All right. Now these are my lines, and I'm going to have those thick black lines around the whole thing. But it's going to be a color illustration. So I want to add a new layer. But before I do that, I'm going to duplicate this background layer, and I'm going to rename it lines. And then I'm actually going to delete the background because the background layer has a lot of restrictions that I don't want to have to mess with. So now I have a layer called lines, which is basically, it is what my background was. Now I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer color. And this is where I'm going to put all of the color that is going to be part of the image. Now I like this magic wand tool. You don't have to use that, but I'm going to be using it quite a bit. So if you see me, go over there for that. And then I'm also going to be using the paint bucket tool, and then also the brush tool. So one of the first things I want to do is give this guy his skin color. And I need to make sure that I have all layers selected so that when I paint, it will only fill up the area that's restricted by these lines. Otherwise, I'll show you what it does if you don't have all layers selected. It's going to fill the whole screen because you're not using those lines as a stopping point. So I want to choose all layers. I want to give him kind of greenish skin. So I'm going through here, filling up all the spots that are his skin. Looks good. And this is going to be my base color. Now, as you can see, I have an ear here that also needs to be green. But let me show you what happens. There's not a line here. So when I fill this area, it's going to make his hair green as well. And I don't want that. So something that you can do really quickly, and I'm sure there's a better way, but this is just my amateurish way to deal with that. I just put a little dot of green there using the brush tool. Then when I fill it, that stops it. It's using all layers, and I have that filled in. Now I'm going to go over here and choose kind of a yellow color for his teeth. He does not brush very well. His mouth is slightly open, and you could use black, but something that I like to do just to give it a little bit of variation is I choose the skin color, and then I go down and choose a very dark green or a dark version of whatever color your skin color is for the creature. And then I fill it in with that just to give it a little variation so it's not just 100% black. Missed a spot there. For his eyes, I'm going to make them barely yellow, just a little bit of yellow so they're not stark white. And to get a different color, what I do is I've got light yellow selected, but I'm going to go to opacity, and I'm going to take it way down, take it down to like 8%, and then use the paint bucket there. And you can barely tell it's not white, but it will make a difference later. And then I want to set my opacity back to 100%. For his hair, I'm going to, trolls, they're very natural, so I'm going to choose kind of a natural looking color there for that. Kind of a brown. And I just noticed that I left off one of his toes down here. I want to. This eyedropper tool is really handy because you can grab a color from anywhere in the document or the picture. So I'm grabbing that green, and then I'm going to go down here and add it to his toe. All right, so he's looking pretty good. Now he has a variety of warts, so I'm going to give these a bright green color. Just go through there very carefully. You can make a wrong click through here. If I click that, his face is going to turn green. So Control Z is your friend. So undo that. Oop, click on the line there. Go through and get all those warts. All right. Now it's time for his jacket. And I'm thinking maybe an orange would look good with these colors. And this is where I kind of play around with it. The beautiful thing about Photoshop is if you don't like it, you can always undo it. Starting with that orange, I'm going to go over here to my color selector and pick a really dark version of that for the shadow. You see there, I selected a color that I'd actually used for his hair, so I don't want to double up on that. So I'm going to try to find a new color that would contrast with that orange. Different shade of orange. And then I've got the shadow under here, so I want to start with my orange color. I'll pick a darker version of that to fill in the shadow. Clicking some little pixels here. All right. A little spot I forgot. Problem with zooming in, you see all these little pixels you might have missed that you probably can't see when you zoom out. For his toenails, I'm going to pick a lighter green, so I'm going to take the green that's very similar to his skin color. It's not enough contrast, so I'm going to keep lowering that down. So we've got a lighter shade of green for his toenails. Now the reason that I put these on different layers is if I make a mistake and I want to undo something, I have the color on a whole different layer, which means if I needed to go back and work on the lines, I could come in here and do that, and then it won't mess with my original artwork. I like that flexibility. Oops. Opacity back to 100%. All right, so he's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to create another layer, and I call this layer shading. I'm over here and I select the brush tool, and I want to make sure that my brush head does not have hard edges. I'm going to get the soft brush for this, and I want it to be about this size. And what I'm going to do, by the way, when you're in the brush tool, if you right click, that brings up your sizing menu. This is where the magic wand is going to come in very handy. And I want the magic wand to sample all layers. Once again, if I told the magic wand to select all that it can on this layer without using other layers, it would select the whole image, and I don't want that. So I want to make sure I've got this sample all layers clicked. Then when I click on the face, I have just the face highlighted, and that's going to be very helpful. So I want to give his face some shading. I'm going to come here and pick a slightly darker color. And I need to turn that opacity down to about 20%. That's usually good, and we'll try it here. And if it's not looking good, we can always change it. That's actually not dark enough. So go here, maybe pick a darker color, keeping it at 20. See if that's giving us enough contrast. You don't want a ton of contrast. You want it to just be really subtle. And you got to think about, where are the shadows? Where's our light sources coming in from this direction? So everywhere that's behind something will get a little bit of shadow. Give him a few extra dots there. I did the face, but I forgot to highlight this little section here. So I'm going to highlight that. Go back and give it a run through with the brush. Get this ear. I'm just highlighted that one ear, so I can't mark on this anymore, which is why I love the magic wand tool. I'm going to deselect that. Give that a little bit of shadow. I want to hit every part that is green because I've got this color ready. It's looking good. Our light source is over on the left-hand side, so we want to make sure that we're just giving shadows to the right-hand side. I'm going over this area multiple times to make it even darker. With that 20% opacity, each time you pass over it, it's going to make it a little bit darker. Now okay, so that's all the green. Now this bone here is white, but we want to give it a little bit of shadow. And when you're dealing with something white, something I like to do, rather than giving it a gray shadow, is to give it a blue shadow. Kind of makes it pop a little bit. And then while I'm doing that, I'll come up here and do the same to his eye, just very lightly going around the side of the eye. You don't have to shade each and every part of the image, but it's something I like to do, gives it some dimensionality. You can also create highlights. So I've got the teeth highlighted here. Instead of shading dark on one side, I'm going to shade them a little bit lighter on the side that's receiving light. So I used white there to do that. Go up here to the hair, choose the color, make it darker. It's a big area, so I might make my brush a little bit bigger. Come in here and create some shadows. And the cool thing about this is, since it's on its own layer, if I mess up and I don't like what I did, I can always take my eraser and I can just erase on that layer. So it doesn't erase any of my lines. I could go through and, erase a spot where I messed up, but I think all that looks good, so we're going to keep it. I need to do his belt buckle. On this yellow, it's pretty yellow, and I'm not sure a troll would have his belt buckle shined up quite that nicely, so I'm going to make it a little dingier and make it a little darker on the bottom. As I did that, I noticed that there are a couple spots that we did not get on the color level, so I'm going to go back to that level and just fill up those areas. Lots of pixel clicking. If I wanted to, if I didn't want to risk clicking in the wrong place, by the way, if I click in the wrong place, this happens. It fills that line area, so just click very carefully, but I could also go in and get my brush tool and find those little spots like that. Let me show you an example of how to do that. So you get your brush tool, you make it a hard edge because you're not shading, and you want to make sure it's 100% opacity, and you can come in there and fill those little gaps that way. All right. Now sometimes when I'm wanting to be extra fancy, I create a layer called texture. I go to my brush tool and I pick, you have lots of options. Find something that kind of looks like dots. I make it as big as I need it to be. And then I can go in here and add some texture to his face. I'm actually going to make this gray because I wanted him to have a little bit of gray in his skin tone. And just to make sure this doesn't end up anywhere where I don't want it, I'm going to use the magic wand tool again. I'm going to highlight the entire area of the face, and this is going to be his skin tone, so I'm only going to highlight areas where his skin is. Got it all highlighted there. Ooh, forgot that toe. And then I'm going to go through, and I've got opacity at 100%, and I'm just going to go through and add some texture. Now this does not look good, and I realize that, but we're going to do something in just a second to make it look better. Oop. At any point I realize that I forgot to click on part of his body, I can always add that with the magic wand and continue clicking. I got the texture a little too strong right there, so I'm going to go in here, and since this is its own layer, I can erase that, and then I can go back and just make it a little bit lighter. I don't want it to be too strong. All right. Now that's pretty bold, and I don't really want it that bold. So what I can do, and this was part of the plan all along, I'll just deselect this, is I'm going to turn the opacity of that entire layer down. It's at 100%. You can see that here. I'm going to turn it down until it's very subtle. Maybe if you turn it down to 0, you can't see it at all. That's still pretty strong. I want to turn it down to where it's just kind of, you can see it, but maybe it doesn't draw attention to itself. All right. Kind of have a mean looking troll there. Something else I like to do when I get to this point in the artwork is go to the lines and select the background. And some of these areas I'll have to click on individually. And I'm going to delete the background. And what I want to do is create a thick black outline around the character. I'll delete that as well. And to do that, I go to Layer, and I select Layer Style, and I select Stroke. I have a couple options here. I can put the black outline on the outside, the inside, or what I prefer to do is the center, because it just looks a little bit better for what my purposes. I can turn up how many pixels I want that to be. I could give them a really thick outline, but I want it to be subtle. So right about there looks good. You might have noticed this little dot appeared. Well, I didn't realize that before. Just a little dot. So I want to make sure that I'm on my lines layer, and I'm going to erase those dots, which will also erase the outline. If I decide that I don't like the extra outline, I can always come over here and under effects, I can take that off. To finalize this, I would go back through, and there are going to be a few little spots where the color didn't get to. I want to correct all of those. And now looking at this, I'm thinking that that outline is too strong. So I can double click on that. I can go back and I can make it more subtle. Let's do 2 pixels. All right. And that's how it's done. Like I said before, I'm not a professional, but if you enjoy creating comic artwork, this is an easy way to do it. Photoshop's a great tool, and so I encourage you to play around with it, have fun, be creative, and hope you enjoyed this video.